What's going on, guys? Welcome back for another week of Power Rankings. Today was the NHL Trade Deadline, so I figured instead of making two separate videos, one to cover the trade deadline itself and then another for the Power Rankings, I was going to do something a little bit different this week and kind of just mush the two together. So this isn't going to be the standard Power Ranking of just how teams performed over the last week and over their recent stretches, but it's also going to include a little bit of how I feel they performed over the course of the last week or so with their deadline trade. So if things seem a little bit out of whack, that's some of the reason why. The other bit is probably just because I disagree with your opinion, which is totally fine. But yeah, let's get started. No surprises at number 32. It is different from last week, but it is the San Jose Sharks. They go 2-2 on the week, which is not horrible, but 2-5-3 in their last 10, and they sold the house over the last week or so. Vanacek gone, Zetterlund gone, traded what's his face to the Winnipeg Jets. I'm recording this at 1:30, so my train of thought is just gone. Luke Cunningham, there we go. Thank you. Yeah, not a horrible week for the Sharks. Traded away everyone. I don't anticipate their season going any better than it has already. Number 31, I have the Nashville Predators. They were surprisingly quiet on deadline day today. They're exactly 500 over their last week and over their last 10, 5-5 and 2-2. So not horrible by them. Again, just pretty surprised that they didn't really go out and make any splashes considering the way that their season's gone so far. So I would anticipate probably a pretty big offseason for them considering nothing happened today. But yeah, very surprising to see players going for the prices that they were going for and to not have Nashville be involved. At number 30, and they move up 2 spots. They actually had a really good week, and I thought they did pretty good with their big trade. That was the Chicago Blackhawks. In the 2 games he's played, Spencer Knight has looked phenomenal, getting W's against, I believe, the Kings and Utah, and I think over 35 saves in both of them. So very good performances from him. And the Hawks as a whole, actually 3-0-1 on the week. So some good stuff for them. They maintain Ryan Donato, which was an interesting choice, but I don't hate it. And yeah, kind of a quiet deadline aside from that big Seth Jones for Spencer Knight in a first trade. At number 29, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I frankly wouldn't be surprised to see Chicago pass them if these trends continue. Pittsburgh 0-3-1, 2-7-1 in their last 10. They were sellers. They didn't get rid of Rickard Rakell, which was really surprising considering they got relatively decent pieces for both Anthony Beauvillier and Cody Glass, 2 guys that really aren't all that much to be desired. So hanging on to your guy that has term left as your leading goal scorer, definitely a little bit puzzling. I get it because he has term left, but nonetheless, not a huge fan of that move by Dubas, and we see the Penguins fall to number 29. Number 28, also falling 1 spot, and that is, jumping 1 spot. The Seattle Kraken just flip-flopping with Pittsburgh. They go 1-2 on the week. They're 3-6-1 in their last 10. I thought the pieces that they got back were pretty solid. I guess actually. They just had the Brendan Tanev trade, maybe. Unless I'm forgetting something. Anyway, yeah, slightly better week than Pittsburgh. 3-6-1 in their last 10. They get the return for Tanev. I have them just above the Penguins. Number 27, this team dropping 2 spots, and that's the Buffalo Sabres. A pretty disappointing week and an interesting trade deadline period, to say the least. They, instead of moving on from the likes of a Jordan Greenway or a Jason Zucker, they extend both of them at fairly expensive prices. I think it was 4.75 for 2 years for Zucker, and then it was $4 million a year for Greenway, and I don't remember what the term was. And then their big splash came in the form of a Josh Norris and Jacob Bernard-Docker for Dylan Cousins, and I'm blanking on the name of the defenseman that went back to Ottawa as well, but definitely an interesting trade. I think I lean favoring it for Ottawa. I mean, it's interesting for both teams for sure. I mean, from the player's standpoint for Ottawa, if you saw the reaction that Brady Tkachuk had, he's obviously not thrilled with it. Obviously, him and Josh Norris are best friends pretty much, right? So an interesting trade from that standpoint. But also just the fact that these 2 players are pretty similar. One of them coming off of a couple of seasons where he's been struggling. The other one struggles to stay healthy. So I don't think either one makes the other team dramatically better, but we'll talk about some other Senators moves once we get to them. So yeah, interesting week or so for the Sabres, and not really a huge fan of what they did, and they on the ice did not really look any better going 0-3-1 this week. So I'm going to have them at number 27. At number 26, we have the Philadelphia Flyers. They went 1-2 on the week. They're 4-4-2 in their last 10. Their big move, of course, comes in the form of saying goodbye to Scott Laughton. They got a pretty good return for him, so I'm content with that for the Flyers. Yeah, not really too much else to talk about there for Philadelphia. Number 25, and this was a team that I was kind of high on coming into this week, but they didn't have the greatest week, and that's the Anaheim Ducks. They didn't really do a lot in the trade market. They also went 1-3. They're 5-4-1 in their last 10. They looked like, outside looking in ahead, they continued to play really well. They actually might have been in the fight for a playoff spot at the end, which would have been crazy considering the roster they have on paper. But after this week, I think that's pretty much squashed, especially with how some of the teams ahead of them are playing right now. So not the worst week for Anaheim, but a little bit of a heartbreaker, probably if you are a Ducks fan directly, because I think it's very, very unlikely at this point that they can stay in the hunt for a playoff spot, if that's even what you guys were hoping for at this point. Number 24, and this team jumps 3 spots. It's the New York Islanders. There was a lot of back and forth on what this team was going to do regarding Brock Nelson, regarding Kyle Palmieri. And I think after seeing what some other teams got for lesser players, Lou Lamoriello had no choice but to move Brock Nelson. I mean, they ended up getting a very, very good haul for him. Callum Ritchie, a first-round pick. I mean, Brock Nelson's great, don't get me wrong. He's not had the greatest year. And Callum Ritchie's like a top 15 prospect from his draft year, probably. And, of course, you get another first-round pick there as well. So it's good to see the Islanders kind of focusing on the future. And then in the present, they actually went 2-1 this week. So not the worst week out of them. They're 4-6-0 in their last 10, so still not great. They're certainly not going to be making the playoffs. But all in all, if you're an Islanders fan at the end of Friday, you're probably pretty happy with the way things went. Number 23, and this is a franchise that will be feeling the exact opposite way, and I almost put them below the Islanders because of the deadline piece alone, and that's the Boston Bruins. The Bruins sold everybody, man. I mean, I saw a tweet earlier that was like, of the team that won the President's Trophy with that crazy like 65 whatever and whatever record, the best regular season record of all time, there's only 5 players from that team left, which is crazy because that was 2 years ago. But yeah, it's down to Swayman and Pasta and McAvoy to really kind of carry the ship there. No more Marchand. They get a very underwhelming return from him. It was a conditional 2027 second round pick that becomes a 2028 first if the Panthers win 2 rounds and Marchand plays at least 50% of the games. I mean, if it was, I was listening to a Mike Bartner video earlier, if it was something like he said, just them playing playoff games, right? If Marchand plays a playoff game, it becomes a first, then you're pretty much guaranteed that that's a first, right? But to have to win 2 rounds, the Panthers are a really good team. I would by no means be surprised if they did that, but that's a big gamble for the Bruins to take on your captain and a very capable player still to only get a second. If that ends up staying a second, that's an identical return for what the Penguins got for Anthony Beauvillier, which would be extremely disappointing from Don Sweeney. On the other side, Brandon Carlo moving out. That's the other really big move they make. He goes to Toronto in a 3-team trade, and the Bruins get Fraser Minton and a first. So pretty good work there from the Bees on that one in particular. They also got a pretty good haul for Charlie Coyle, Casey Middlestat, and I believe a second-round pick going back there. So good stuff on those 2 trades, but the Marchand one in particular, probably not the greatest in in Don Sweeney's resume. Number 22, and sorry for being a bit long-winded on the Bruins there, Montreal. They did literally nothing at the trade deadline, but they had a good week. 2-0-1 and 6-3-1 in their last 10. They're still very much in the fight for a playoff spot, which made it all that more surprising that they, again, made literally 0 moves at the deadline. Again, like an Anaheim, like a Chicago, you don't expect them to be adding at this point because they weren't really expected to be where they're at right now, but I feel like you have to at least go out and do something like what Columbus did and add something, right? Like give a little bit of extra oomph to the guys that you've already had and say, hey, we believe in you guys. Whether we end up getting there or not is great. But, yeah, I think all in all, the Canadians have looked pretty good. And the results obviously show on the ice. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a fun race down the stretch in the East. At number 21, big drop here, man. Detroit, 0-4-0 on the week, 3-6-0 in their last 10. And they really didn't go out and do much to inspire much of anything, really, similar to Montreal. I mean, they made the move for Craig Smith and Peter Mrazek, they bring back a guy who was really successful there previously, and Mrazek, who will probably now be the backup behind Cam Talbot. But the on-ice product just has not been good. They had the 2 losses to Columbus back-to-back, and then lost 3 more games after that, capping things off tonight with a game in Washington where they had a lead and completely threw it away. 2 shorthanded goals against. And yeah, just not good stuff at all from the Red Wings right now, allowing a lot of room for teams like Montreal, New York to get back in the mix, and for teams like Columbus and Ottawa to try to get into a lead on them, right? So not good from Detroit. We'll see if they can kind of bounce back. But again, on the management side, they really did nothing to improve their team. Again, I don't hate the Craig Smith, Peter Mrazek trade because Joe Veleno was not really providing them any value, but yeah, definitely feel like there was more that could be done there, and definitely some questions surrounding Steve Yzerman after this trade deadline. At number 20, the aforementioned Ottawa Senators. A much bigger day today, right? They get Fabian Zetterlund. They get Dylan Cousins. They get, again, I'm still completely blanking on the defenseman they got, but kind of swapped depth pieces, JBD, for the guy they got from Buffalo. A good day for them, I think, all in all. They are gonna probably have to struggle a little bit out of the gate. I don't think Brady Tkachuk, their captain and emotional leader, is gonna be super happy that they traded away his number 1 guy, right? But overall, I do think it was a good day for the Sens, and they actually had an alright week. 2-0-1. They're only 4-5-1 in their last 10, but it was a good week for them on the ice too. So we'll see if they can continue that, and if these trades end up working out for them over the last 20 or so games. Number 19, and this was a team I struggled with where to place. They go 1-1-2 on the week, and they were also very quiet today. That was the Calgary Flames. Yeah, not overly surprised that they didn't go out and do a whole lot, just because, again, they're in kind of this weird spot where they're over performing a little bit. It's like you want same deal as Montreal. You want to reward the guys for the work they've done so far, but you don't want to kind of screw up what they've already built as far as the way the rebuild's being structured, right? I really wouldn't be surprised to see this team make the playoffs. There's one team ahead of them that is really on fire in the West that's outside a spot right now that could also very well get in. But yeah, a little surprising to see Calgary not do much of anything at the deadline here either. Number 18, I have the Columbus Blue Jackets. Struggle with these guys too. They make the Luke Cunnin trade. I think that was the only trade they made today. They go 1-2 on the week, 4-5-1 in their last 10. The 2 big wins over Detroit is what's kind of boisting them up here. Hoisting. I am so tired. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Again, the East race is going to come down to the wire, I think, assuming teams don't really fall off after the deadline. And we'll see what happens. I don't know if just adding Luke Cunnin is going to be enough to keep these guys in the mix. I think teams like the Rangers, like the Senators, and frankly like the Red Wings will end up passing them. But yeah, for now, the Blue Jackets still doing enough to scrape by and stay in the mix here in the East. Number 17, the Vancouver Canucks. A really interesting team to watch over the last couple days. They get rid of Carson Soucy. There was a lot of rumors surrounding Brock Besser. He does not end up getting moved. That's going to look brutal for the Canucks front office if he just ends up walking in free agency, which based on the way talks have gone, seems like it's probably going to be the case. So assuming the Canucks don't pull off some kind of miracle run and go on a deep playoff push, this has not been a great trade deadline for them, and it will probably not be a great offseason for them, and one that's going to bring a lot of turmoil, I think, depending on where things go. So overall, if you're a Canucks fan today, probably not very happy, especially seeing what Brock Besser potentially could have gone for, right? I know there was the comments made about, if we saw what was getting offered for him, we'd have to run it, or he'd have to run it high, whatever. Yeah, just not great from Vancouver, in my opinion. Number 16 into the top half here, we have Utah. Utah 1-1-1 on the week, but 6-3-1 in their last 10. And it's not so much what they didn't do at the deadline. It's more the cohesion that they seem to be coming into right now. They're finally all healthy. Their goaltending looks pretty good. And the scoring that's been on and off for them for a lot of the year seems to be picking up a bit, which has been, again, their biggest issue really all season. So if they can continue that, they're one of the 2 teams in the West that I could absolutely see making a push. The other team that I personally would rather not see in the playoffs, but that is playing very well right now at number 15, the St. Louis Blues. They go 3-1 on the week, capping it off with a win tonight against the Ducks, and they are 7-2-1 in their last 10. They didn't do any crazy additions. They did maintain Braden Shen, but right now they're just playing really, really strong hockey. Jordan Binnington looks really good after the Four Nations break. And I talked about it a little bit on the stream that I was running during the trade deadline today. They have a top six that's pretty capable, right? I don't think it's a top six that's cup winning by any means. You never know, but it probably should be a playoff top six, if I'm being completely honest. The rest of that team, maybe not so much, but they definitely have the talent at the top end of their lineup to make some noise. So, again, the way things are going in Vancouver, the way things are going for Calgary, I would not be surprised to see these guys sneak in as a wild card. And then from there, who knows? You have a Stanley Cup winning goaltender. You have Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, a bunch of guys that have some decent experience. So we'll see what happens for St. Louis, but right now playing very, very good, and I have them at number 15. At number 14, and these guys move up 5 spots, and it's really not something I was super in love with, but the way that the East went down today, and the way that they've been playing lately, I had a hard time bumping them behind a lot of these Western teams that are 15 through 19. They're not, I don't think, going to end up behind Columbus. That's the Rangers. As a Caps fan, I don't want them to be that high. It would be hilarious for me to see them miss the playoffs. Again, better for hockey when they're in it. Don't get me wrong. I totally understand that. But 2-0-1 in their last 10, or this week, 6-3-1 in their last 10. They offload Riley Smith. They bring in Carson Soucy. They extend Urho Vakanainen. They didn't really do a whole lot of big deals at the deadline today, but the pieces are still there for them to make a run if they want to, right? I think it's more of a performance thing for the guys they already have. Again, adding some pieces at the deadline always seems to help teams, right? Whether it makes them, have enough to go all the way, or at least get through a round or two that maybe they would not have had they not had the depth. But I still think the Rangers are a really strong team. I do think they're going to make it in. I think one of Detroit, Ottawa, Columbus is going to get bumped out by them. And it's going to be a really difficult out for a team in a wild card spot, which will probably end up being Washington, that catches them in the first round. We'll see what happens. Pretty good of late. We know what Shesterkin brings when he gets in the playoffs, so this is not a team I'm hoping to match up against in the first round. And, if they continue playing the way that they are, they're going to end up there. At number 13, dropping 1 spot, and this is the Devils. I could have dropped the Devils more than this, frankly. The Jack Hughes news sucks for them. I feel horrible for that fan base. And then the lack of moves that Tom Fitzgerald made at the deadline was not overly surprising. But, I mean, they're still probably going to make the playoffs. There's enough there that the team's not going to completely fall off a cliff. But you are a very different team without Jack Hughes than you are with him, of course. There's no questioning that, I don't think. And to go out, you add Cody Glass, you get Dennis Cholowski from the Islanders, which is your 12th defenseman that could potentially be on your roster in the NHL. Just really leaving a lot to be desired. And then, of course, on the ice, it has not looked great either. They were 1-3 this week. They were 4-6-0 in their last 10. So struggling a good bit here for the Devils. We'll see what happens. Hamilton also injured. Siegenthaler also injured. So a lot of stuff not going the right way for the Devils. And then a tough loss tonight, I think 6-1 versus a very good Winnipeg Jets team, which is a team they would match up against in the playoffs if they made a deep run towards the Cup final. I think that's pretty out there at this point in the season, but we'll see. Anyway, Devils struggling quite a bit. I have them at 13 and could see them continue to fall over the next couple of weeks. At number 12, they bump up 1 spot, flip-flopping with New Jersey, and that's Edmonton. Also surprisingly quiet today. I think a team that has, prime McDavid, prime Draisaitl, they have a pretty strong top 6. To see them go out and make just the Jake Wallman trade was a little surprising. Don't get me wrong, that's a very good pickup for them. I like that a lot. But I was a little surprised to see them do nothing else of substance, right? They announced that Evander Kane's going LTIR. He'll probably be back for the playoffs. I feel like there was more to be done here. I don't know. I could be wrong. Stuart Skinner could turn up in the playoffs. If he doesn't, maybe Calvin Pickard does. I don't know. I don't love that they didn't do anything else. I think taking a shot at a John Gibson, even if they had to do some really, really weird cap manipulation to do it, could have been worth the gamble, but I guess we'll find out in about a month or so. At number 11, this team drops one spot, and this was another team surprisingly quiet. The Los Angeles Kings also didn't have a great week, 0-2-1, and they're 4-3-3 in their last 10, so collecting points but not getting a lot of wins. Their only move today really was the Andrei Kuzmenko trade for Philadelphia, and frankly, their group is still pretty good despite them not having done more than that, but for a team that for the last week or so has been rumored to be in on the Mikko Rantanen sweepstakes, to then go out and only get Andrei Kuzmenko is a little bit disappointing, I think. And I know a lot of their resources were probably going towards those negotiations for Rantanen, but I don't know. I think when you're in on a fish that big, for you to only get Andrei Kuzmenko as a consolation prize is not the best thing for the team. But we'll see what happens for the Kings and if they can continue what the product has been on ice for the last week. But as the Kings season has been the entire season, a little bit up and down, so next week they'll probably bounce back like they tend to do. At number 10, another team just flip-flopping. This middle section here was a lot of up, one, down, one, up, one, down, one. Minnesota Wild. They don't make any really big moves. Not super surprising. They're in a spot not dissimilar from New Jersey where they're probably going to make the playoffs. They're probably not going to make it any deeper than like the second round at most. And the offseason is really where I think a lot of their work is going to come in. They are going to have a lot of cap space with the Parise and Suter contracts coming off the books. It doesn't make sense for them to really try to go all in with the restrictions that they have right now, right? So not surprising to see them be quiet at the deadline. But they have a pretty good week, 2-1, a tough loss tonight to Vancouver, 5-5 in their last 10. Not a ton better than LA, but I thought just better enough that they could get the nudge up there. And at least they had the Gus Nyquist trade, which is a step ahead of the Kuzmenko trade, in my opinion. Number 9, dropping one spot. They have been fine on the ice, 3-1 in their last 10, but their deadline was interesting. Carolina. The return for Rantanen was pretty good. Like I saw the tweet of all of what they sent out versus what they got back for Rantanen / Marty Necas. And it was like they gave up Necas and Jack Drury and the picks to Colorado. And in return, they got like 2 firsts, 2 thirds, Logan Stankoven, and I think there was one other pick in there. So like the haul overall, really, really good. The problem is they were a contender going into this trade deadline. And in giving up, in essence, both Marty Necas and Mikko Rantanen, they took a step back with what they have on the ice. And I don't think there's really any argument that can be made against that. They did kind of in the 11th hour try to make a push for Rickard Rakell, which would have been a nice, again, consolation prize to having an elite scoring winger. That didn't happen. So their top 6 is weakened. And they have a nice little puddle of extra picks now, but I think they would have been well suited, and I'm sure they did try to go out and make some moves happen with those picks that they got from Dallas for Rantanen. But to come out of this deadline without anything really big for them and to see the team be worse, I have a hard time buying that as a Canes fan. I would be extremely unhappy with the way that this deadline went for them. I think unless they go on a pretty deep run, their fans have all the right reasons to be very unhappy. And frankly, even if they go on a deep run, that's not something this team's unfamiliar with. They've been doing that for the last couple of years. They're notorious for having the roster on paper, having the guys in the room, having the quality coach, and then getting to the playoffs and just not being able to get it done. So even though the standard probably should be lower with what they have on paper going into the playoffs, which they're going to make still, even making it to like a conference final is probably still not good enough for that fan base, which I frankly think is totally reasonable. So a very interesting deadline from the Canes. We'll be very interested to see what they do in the offseason, but for now, dropping them one spot to number 9, despite how good they've been on the ice. Number 8, flip-flopping with them once again. Colorado. Colorado obviously went and made some pretty big moves. They get Eric Johnson back, not a very big move. They get Charlie Coyle as their third-line center for Casey Middlestat. An interesting move for the long term. I don't hate it for the short term. They did pay a lot for it. and then Brock Nelson to fill in that 2C spot is a really big move. Again, gave up a lot, but I like that. They're really structured now down the middle to be a strong playoff team. 3 big guys, 3 strong guys built for the physicality that comes with the playoffs and for probably the inevitable first round series against Dallas, which is going to be incredible. But yeah, they've also been fine on the ice. 2-0 this week, a short week for them. 7-3-0 in their last 10. The defense is rounded out a decent bit. The forward group is strengthened. Mackenzie Blackwood still looks good in net. They're primed for a playoff run now. Number 7, another team that was surprisingly quiet, and their Twitter admin was like the only person putting work in today, the Vegas Golden Knights. They do get Riley Smith, which is cool to see him go back there, but nothing else really of substance. But on the ice, they've been very good. 3-0 on the week, 7-3-0 in their last 10. Not really too much else to say about Vegas. We'll see what happens to them come the playoffs. Number 6, and this team made their big move before trade deadline day, which was fine. Oh, no, excuse me. Do I have this flipped? No, we're good. Never mind. I just can't read. The Toronto Maple Leafs, their big splash came at the 11th hour on trade deadline day through Brandon Carlo. They didn't really add too much else. I mean, they get Scott Laughton. It's fine. Their center depth is better. I don't know. Scott Laughton is great. Like, he's a good depth center for a playoff push. I just, like, is that enough to move the needle? Carlo certainly is. Like, that's a big deal for the Leafs. And Steve Dangle's clips of just talking about the defense just being beefy was hilarious. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, again, at the end of the day for the Leafs, it comes down to the playoffs and can they win a round? Can they win 2? Can they win 3? Can they do the thing? Who knows? On the ice, they still look pretty good. They were 1-1-1 this week, 7-2-1 in their last 10. The combination of the 1-1-1 and the only getting Scott Laughton for your center depth was kind of what made me bump them down. And then the 2 teams immediately above them made some very big moves and have also been very, very good on the ice. So nothing really against the Leafs here. I just couldn't really justify keeping these next 2 teams below them. And it just so happens that they're both in their division. So number 5, the Tampa Bay Lightning. 3-1-0 on the week, 9-1-0 in their last 10. They got their bidding done before the deadline, picking up Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand. They barely lose games right now. Andrei Vasilevsky looks like maybe a quarter step back from the way he looked in 2021. Things are clicking the right way for the Lightning, and that is scary if you're a Leafs fan, a Panthers fan, any other Eastern Conference team, any other team in general, because we know what this team can do when they're all clicking like this. Kucherov looks very good. Braden Point, very good. Hedman, very good. I could continue. I'm not going to because they have a roster of 23 guys. So, yeah, the Lightning at number 5. And then, of course, at number 4, the Florida Panthers. Oh, man. Like, I know the Lightning made really strong moves. I still think the Panthers probably have to be the favorite to come out of the East, and they're damn close to being the favorite to win the Cup. I mean, the Seth Jones ad, they paid a lot for it, and I still think long-term they may regret the Spencer Knight move. But short-term, bolstering that blue line, adding a guy with some really, really good veteran experience, a guy that is fully capable of eating a bunch of minutes if you need to, very good move for them, in my opinion, short-term especially. And then you go out and get Vitek Vanacek, who has actually had okay numbers on a very bad San Jose team and has had moments in his career in the past where he's been solid and will be less called upon as a backup to Bobrovsky. I'm fine with that too. You get Kaapo Kähkönen in a trade with Winnipeg in case that doesn't go as planned. I think that's good for them too. And then, of course, the big one at the end of today, the Brad Marchand trade. Yeah, I mean, all you really have to say is that they could ice a line of Kachuk, Bennett, and Marchand in the playoffs, and I think everyone that could potentially ever play them would just want to throw up and run away. That sounds like maybe the most miserable line of hockey players to play against, at least in my lifetime, right? Like, I just turned 26. I cannot think of any other line since I've been alive and watched hockey that I would look at as a imaginative NHL player and say, nope, no thank you, like I would against that line. And then keep in mind they still have plenty of other weapons. Guys like Barkov, Verhaeghe, and Reinhart, which, oh, by the way, would be their first line, and the other line would be their second line. It's ridiculous. This team is loaded. It very well may be better than the team that they went into the playoffs with last year, and they won the Cup last year. So very, very good deadline for the Panthers. We'll be very curious to see what happens there, and if somehow they end up as the 2 or 3 seed in the Atlantic, good luck to whichever of Tampa Bay or Toronto gets them, because that is going to be a buzzsaw whether you win or lose the series, and it's not going to be fun to play against. Anyway, relatively long-winded there again, so I apologize. But number 3, Washington. This is pretty much just on ice related. They're 3-1 in their last 10, or 3-1 on the week, 6-3-1 in their last 10. Their only add today was Beauvillier, which I don't hate. It's kind of been known publicly that they weren't going to make any big shakeups. I think that's the right move. They're probably going to get Ryan Leonard at the end of his season. They're in this weird spot, and I think everyone kind of knows it, where, like, despite how good they are, no one is favoring this team probably over any of the 3 Atlantic seeded teams, right? Like, I'm definitely not taking them over Florida. I'm definitely not taking them over Tampa Bay. And I'm probably still not taking them over Toronto, as good as they've been this season. I just can't look at the 2 lineups that they have on paper, whichever team you want to compare them to, and say, like, with full confidence, yep, I think the Caps are winning this. I would love to. Again, I would love to see Ovi have this great season and the team have this great season and then go on a deep playoff run. I just don't know that I see it happening. So again, I get the reasoning why they don't want to make any big changes, because frankly, they're probably overperforming this season. But the product on ice is still very good. A very impressive win tonight over Detroit. We'll see what happens as they head toward the playoffs. They're pretty much a lock for that at this point. Number 2, bumping down 1 spot as well, dethroned from the number 1 spot. Oh, I switched it. Wow, that's super unfortunate. All right, well, I'm not going back now. Winnipeg's number 2. They had some fine moves, I think. They probably overpaid for the players they got, but I think they needed the depth in guys like Luke Shen and Brandon Tanev. I couldn't not put Dallas at number 1. Looking at their forward group after adding what they added, it's just freaky, man. Like, someone tweeted that it's like potentially the best forward group of the Cap era. And when I first read that tweet, I was like, no, there's no way. But the more I look at that top 6, it's like, where the hell do you run if you're another team? Like, what matchup are you winning? You're not. Like, they have a 60-point scorer with 20 games to go in the season on their 3rd line, and he's 21 years old. Like, good luck, man. Yeah, they made the Mikko Rantanen trade. They gave up a lot. Don't get me wrong. Logan Stankoven's going to be a very good player, and 2 first-round picks are 2 first-round picks. 2 third-round picks are 2 third-round picks. It's a king's ransom for Mikko Rantanen, but the guy is like 7th all-time in playoff points per game amongst guys that have like 50 or more games, and the guys ahead of him are like Gretzky, Lemieux, McDavid, Draisaitl, McKinnon, and Messier, or something just like absolutely stupid. You 100,000% pay as many picks as you need to get that guy on your team, and then you just go try to murder everybody in the playoffs. Like this, again, I mentioned it earlier, and not dissimilar from the Atlantic Division, the fact that one of Dallas, Winnipeg, or Colorado is probably going to get knocked out in the first round is so stupid silly. So yeah, they're 3-0 this week, 7-2-1 in their last 10. You can coin flip which one of Winnipeg or Dallas you really want a number 1. Like, Winnipeg's coming off that crazy win streak. They did lose 2 games this week. Whatever. Both of these teams are so good. Dallas also had the Wyatt Johnson extension. I believe the number was 5 years at 8-point-something million, right? Which is, I think, great for both Dallas and Johnston, right? Because 5 years from now, an $8 million contract is going to look like a $6 million contract or a $5 million contract. And then when he goes to get extended again when he's 27 years old, he's going to be able to get an 8 by like 15 because the cap's going to have grown. Whatever. Imaginary number, right? 8 by 15. That's what I'm going with. And it's still going to be fine. And it's going to go till he's 35. Like, he's a 21-year-old kid. And he's a stud. And they just got Mikko Rantanen. Like, what? Good luck. Good luck. Yeah, I don't know. After today, I have a hard time picturing these two teams not being the ones in the Cup final. I think we're going to be in for some crazy first-round series. Again, Atlantic and Central Division are going to be brutal. And I think there was a lot of teams that I was pretty surprised that they didn't go out and make some more noise. Looking at LA, looking at Vegas, looking at the Rangers. A lot of teams made some interesting choices today. But one of the more memorable trade deadlines of the last 10 years or so, in my opinion. So let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. I apologize. I think this video has run way longer than I wanted it to, but fun to chat about this stuff. Let me know who I have too high and too low again. A little bit of a hybrid power ranking today, so don't give me too much hate in the comments. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe. It is free, and we will chat with you guys soon.